Hey there, and welcome back to the show. I'm Alan, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Whether you're tuning in while driving, working out, or just relaxing, I've got a value packed episode for you. First of all, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're putting in the time with your mobility training, but not seeing any results? Maybe it feels like you're just going through the motions and you're not even sure if it's worth it. Well, let me tell you, you're not alone. This is such a common experience, and today we're going to tackle it head on. Mobility training is one of the most misunderstood parts of fitness. Too often it's treated as a passive, mindless task, just another box to check off your list. But here's the thing. Real mobility gains comes from purposeful action, understanding the science behind each movement, and creating the right stress to induce change. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. By the end of this episode, you will have a clear understanding of what true mobility training looks like, how to structure it for success, and I will be sharing some actionable tips to level up your approach starting today. So let's get into it. Let's start with a simple question. What is mobility? Is it the same as flexibility? Not exactly. Flexibility is a passive range of motion your body can achieve. For example, if you bend over and touch your toes, that's flexibility. Mobility, on the other hand, is active. It's the ability to control a range of motion with strength and stability. Imagine lifting your leg as high as you can without assistance. That's, for example, mobility. And here's where intent comes in. To improve mobility, you need to challenge your body in ways that build strength and control in those ranges. Simply stretching or passively holding positions won't cut it. So why does it really matter? Let's take the example of squatting. If your hips lack mobility, you might compensate by rounding your back or letting your knees cave in, which isn't really bad. But over time, these compensations lead to pain and injuries. But if you work on hip mobility with intent, strengthening those end ranges and training your nervous system, you will move more efficiently and safely. Here is an analogy. Think of your nervous system as a security guard of your body. If it doesn't feel confident that you can control a range of motion, it won't let you access it. This is why mobility training must involve your brain. You are essentially telling the security guard, hey, I've got this and let me in. I once worked with an athlete who struggled with shoulder pain during overhead presses. No amount of stretching helped. But when we focused on active shoulder mobility, strengthening the end ranges, and connecting the brain to those positions, the pain disappeared and the range of motion improved dramatically. So how do you actually train mobility with intent? Let's break it down step by step. First, start with reps and focused effort. Like I said, mobility isn't about rushing through exercises. Start with 25 slow controlled reps for each movement, gradually increasing to 50 or even 100 reps as you build strength and control. For example, if you're doing hip controlled articular rotations, also known as CARs, focus on creating tension throughout the motion. Step number 2, move with purpose. Every movement should be deliberate. Imagine you're painting a masterpiece, every stroke matters. Avoid rushing, especially at the edges of your range where control is most critical. Step number 3, use progressive overload. Just like in strength training, when you're training your back, when you're training your chest, when you're training your bicep, and you want to see gains, you want to see improvement, mobility requires the same progression. This could mean adding resistance bands, increasing the range of motion, or holding positions longer. For instance, if you're working on ankle mobility, start with body weight and gradually add light weights or resistance bands. Step number 4, focus on weak spots. We all have areas where we feel tight or unstable. These are the places that need the most attention. For example, if your hips feel restricted, prioritize hip mobility drills like the 90-90 transitions or pails and rails stretches. Step number 5, consistency is key, like with everything. This is where most people fall short. Mobility training isn't a one-on-one thing. It requires daily practice. Just 5 to 10 minutes a day can lead to significant improvements over time, but you have to stay consistent. Think of mobility like learning to play an instrument. At first, every note feels awkward, but with consistent practice, it becomes second nature. Mobility training is the same. Daily effort rewires your body and nervous system. So let's see what science has to say about mobility training. Active mobility versus passive stretching. Research shows that active mobility exercises like CARs or end-range isometrics are more effective than passive stretching. Why? Because they engage the muscles and tissues in those ranges, creating lasting change. Another research found that active stretching improves both flexibility and joint stability better than passive methods. Similarly, McGill 2001, another study, highlighted how repetitive low-load movements help remodel soft tissues and improve joint function. Then I checked on another few studies that were talking about high repetition movements, and it said that repetition is key. The studies show that performing low-load, high repetition movements strengthens the neuromuscular connections needed for better control. This is why I really like the CARs or controlled articular rotations, because this is something that I use with my clients. And like I said previously, we start with you can start at 10 reps a day, you can start at 20 reps, but eventually you would want to progress to 100 movements a day. And it doesn't have to be all in the same session. You can split them throughout the day. If you're someone who works on a desk, you work a 9 to 5 job, just simply take a break, a short break every half an hour. Of course, if your work allows you to do it, and I don't want you to get fired, but maybe put an alarm every 30 minutes and just perform 10 reps. And eventually at the end of the day, you will get to the 100 reps. Before we wrap up, let's talk about some common mistakes people make with mobility training. The first one is rushing through exercises. Like I said earlier, mobility work isn't a race. If you're speeding through reps, you're missing the opportunity to build control. And like I said, especially at the end ranges. Number two, ignoring weak spots. It's tempting to focus on what you're already good at, but real progress comes from addressing your limitations. And most of the time, once you address these limitations, you will see that automatically it will help to improve the areas around those limitations. For example, I had a client who had some issues and was stuck in an anterior pelvic tilt, and once we were able to correct that, he was immediately feeling better in terms of how his hip flexors were feeling and how his hamstrings were feeling. So you just have to understand that the body works in one unit and that everything is connected to each other and plays a role with each other. So once you fix one thing, you will immediately see progress in the other ones. Step number three, skipping consistency. Mobility improvements take time. If you're only working on it once a week, don't expect big changes. And again, like I said, it doesn't have to be much. You can do it every day, whether it's in your warm-up when you train, whether it's in your warm-up before running, whether it's in between breaks at work, or you can even just be watching Netflix and just going down on the floor for a few minutes and do your mobility drills. It doesn't take much, guys. There's no excuses right here. And lastly, number four, over-relying on passive stretching. So remember, flexibility without strength is like having a car with no brakes. You need both to move safely and efficiently. Now let's sum this up with some actionable steps. Step number one, start each day with 5 minutes of mobility work. Focus on areas where you feel tight or restricted. Step number two, add intent to every movement. Think about the muscles you're working and the range you're controlling. Step number three, progress gradually, whether it's by increasing reps, adding resistance, or holding positions longer. And lastly, number four, stay consistent. Mobility is a daily practice, not a quick fix. So remember that mobility isn't just about being more flexible. It's about moving better, feeling stronger, and reducing your risk of injury. When you train with intent, you unlock a whole new level of performance and potential. Before we wrap up, I want you to remember this. Mobility training is so much more than just stretching or checking a box on your to-do list. It's about moving with purpose, building strength in your ranges and creating a lasting connection between your brain and body. Whether you're an athlete, someone recovering from an injury, or just looking to feel better in your daily movements, intentional mobility work can make a world of difference. Start small, stay consistent, and trust the process. It's a journey worth taking. If you found this episode helpful, I would love for you to share it with someone who could benefit from it. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. As always, I would love to hear from you. Send me your thoughts, questions, or even mobility success stories on social media or through my website. Let's keep the conversation going because your feedback helps shape what we cover here. Thank you for tuning into this episode. I'm Alan, and this is your reminder to move with intent, train smart, and always chase your best self. Until next time.